Welcome to another deep dive. You send us the sources, and we'll dive in and see what we can find.
That's right. We love to get our hands dirty with your fascinating source material.
And today we're tackling something a little different. We're going deep into fiction.
Oh, yeah, into the mind of a fictional character.
Exactly.
Sounds like fun.
It is.
All right, so lay it on me.
So the source material comes from excerpts that you sent in from a short story called Sono, Elena Ferrante, 12,7 by 20,032 centimeters, 5 by 8, by Jessica Verdirame.
Okay.
And the character we're going to try to understand is Francesca.
Francesca. Sounds like a fascinating character.
Oh, she is, and I was hooked right from the first paragraph.
Really? What was it that grabbed you?
Well, the story opens, and Francesca is in this state of high anxiety. She's like totally fixated on all these little things like uh, stain removal and alien abductions.
Oh, wow. Alien abductions.
Yeah, it's a bit out there.
It really is.
But it's like she's looking for any kind of control in a world that just feels out of her
It's
grasp.
grasping at straws.
Exactly. And it really makes you think, like, what has led her to this point?
Yeah. What's going on in her head?
Yeah, and then later on, there's this line that just really struck me. If everyone loved her, she'd truly exist.
That's deep.
It is. It really suggests this deep insecurity, this need for constant validation from others.
It does. It really does.
I mean, do you think that need for validation is like the root cause of her anxiety? Or maybe a symptom of it?
That's a great question, I think, to understand that we really need to look at her past. Like what kind of environment did she come from? What shaped her into the woman she is now?
Well, her upbringing seems to be a key piece of the puzzle, for sure.
Right.
The story paints this really vivid contrast between her childhood in this small town called Sono and the much more, I guess you could say, bohemian atmosphere of her friend Eleanora's home.
So two very different worlds.
Yeah, like polar opposites.
Interesting.
Yeah, so Serena represents this sort of stability, tradition, maybe even a bit of boredom. And then you have Eleanora's home, which is filled with art and intellectual discussions and, this sense of freedom that Francesca clearly craves.
Ah, I see. So you can almost see how those two contrasting environments would shape her anxieties and her desires.
Absolutely. It really makes you think about how our childhood environments can leave such a lasting impact on us.
That's true.
How we're constantly seeking out those familiar feelings, whether they're positive or negative.
Yeah, and then you add in her relationship with her parents.
Oh, right. Her parents.
They seem to represent these traditional Seregno values,
Yep.
hardworking, devout people.
Yeah, very straight-laced.
Yeah, and Francesca, especially in her rebellious teenage phase, pushes back against everything they stand for.
Classic teenage rebellion.
Exactly. But do you think those rebellions were ultimately positive for her? Like, did they help her break free from those small-town constraints? Or did they contribute to this feeling of being lost and unmoored?
That's a good question. It's almost like she's constantly swinging between these two poles. The stability of her upbringing and this yearning for something more.
Right.
And this brings us to a pivotal relationship in her life. Her friendship with Eleonora.
Eleonora. Ah, yes, the friend with the bohemian household.
Exactly. She's the one who introduces her to art and culture and a much wider social circle.
But it seems like maybe their friendship was a little more complicated than that.
Well, yeah, reading between the lines, I got the sense that Eleonora's effortless grace and confidence might have actually made some of Francesca's insecurities even worse.
That makes sense. You
Yeah.
know. On the one hand, Eleanor opens up this whole new world for Francesca, but on the other hand, she becomes this impossible standard to live up to.
Right, almost like a living embodiment of everything Francesca wants but feels like she lacks.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic for sure.
And then, of course, there's the whole issue of Francesca's romantic history.
Oh, right. Tell me about that.
Well, she's got this pattern of fleeting connections. She just can't seem to fully commit or let anyone get too close.
Interesting.
It's almost like she sabotages herself before things can get too real.
Self-sabotage.
And we learn later on that this fear of intimacy actually stems from her first sexual experience,
Ah, I see.
which, to put it mildly, was not a positive one.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah, it seems like that experience left a lasting scar, made her wary of true intimacy.
Yeah, I can see that.
And this makes her relationship with Stefano all the more interesting.
Stefano. Yes, the mysterious Stefano. Tell me more about him.
Well, right from the start, he's presented as this somewhat emotionally unavailable figure, but Francesca is drawn to him almost magnetically. So what is it about him that she finds so compelling?
Well, there's definitely an intellectual connection, right? But I think it goes deeper than that. I think Francesca sees in Stefano a reflection of her own yearning for validation.
Wow, that's interesting.
He's successful, he's confident, he's desired by others, and by being with him, she's kind of trying to capture some of that for herself.
That makes a lot of sense, especially given her deep-seated insecurities.
Right. Yeah.
And just when it seems like they might be finding some sort of equilibrium, Linda, their daughter, enters the picture.
Oh, a new baby.
And as you might imagine, everything changes.
Of course. How could it not?
Right. So the birth of Linda marks a major turning point in Francesca's life.
Right.
Her focus shifts dramatically, you know, from personal aspirations to motherhood.
Okay.
And we see her putting her own dreams on hold, dedicating herself to caring for her child.
Yeah, that's a big shift.
But it's not a simple transition, that's for sure.
No, I imagine not. Motherhood is never simple.
Exactly. And it's clear that it brings its own set of challenges and anxieties for Francesca.
Right.
There's the sense that she's losing herself in this new role.
That's tough.
Yeah. And her relationship with Stefano is starting to fray a little bit at the edges. And it's interesting to note how the power dynamics in their marriage start to shift.
Really? How so?
Well, Stefano, maybe emboldened by fatherhood, becomes even more confident and assertive, while Francesca finds herself increasingly isolated and full of self-doubt.
So it's almost like the roles are reversing in a way.
It is. And then there's that incident with this suggestive phone call.
Oh, tell me about that.
Well, it's never explicitly stated what's said, but it's heavily implied that Stefano is being inappropriate with someone on the phone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Francesca overhears it but doesn't confront him about it.
That's interesting.
It really speaks volumes about the erosion of trust in their relationship and her inability to directly confront her fears and suspicions.
It's like this wound that never fully heals.
Yeah.
This constant reminder of her perceived powerlessness.
Exactly, and this sense of powerlessness is then further amplified by the challenges she faces as a mother.
What sorts of challenges?
Well, for one thing, there's Linda's biting phase.
Oh, biting. Every parent's nightmare.
I know, right?
It's like the most dreaded phase.
It is, but in the story, it's presented as more than just a typical childhood behavior. It's
Yeah.
almost like a symbolic representation of Francesca's own internal struggles.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's fascinating how the story frames it. Everyone else dismisses it as normal, even endearing.
Right, kids will be kids.
Exactly. But for Francesca, it becomes this constant source of anxiety, a physical manifestation of her own perceived failings as a mother.
I see. So it's like she's internalized all the societal pressures on mothers and is projecting those anxieties onto Linda's behavior.
Exactly. And then to make things even more complex, they have a second child.
Diego. Oh, wow. Another kid. That's got to shake things up.
Oh, it does. And as you might expect, Diego's arrival adds another layer to Francesca's already complicated life.
Of course.
While Linda seems to mirror Stefano's athleticism and ease, Diego is more introspective, more like Francesca herself.
Interesting. So she sees herself in Diego.
She does, and this intensifies her protective instincts, especially towards him. It's like she sees a reflection of her own vulnerabilities in him, and she's desperately trying to shield him from the world's harsh realities.
That's kind of heartbreaking.
It is, and this, coupled with the lingering suspicion about Stefano, leads to this growing sense of isolation and paranoia.
So her anxiety is morphing into something a little more intense.
It is something that starts to border on paranoia, especially when it comes to leaving Diego alone with Linda.
That's a really crucial point in her psychological arc. We're seeing her anxieties kind of spiral out of control.
It is heartbreaking to see how they manifest in this way, leading her to question her own judgment and abilities as a mother.
Yeah, it's really tough.
And it's against this backdrop of escalating anxiety and marital tension that we encounter another source of frustration in Francesca's life, her stagnating career.
Oh, right, her job. Tell me about that.
Well, her job at the newspaper is presented as this soul-crushing experience. She's stuck doing menial tasks.
Ugh, I hate that.
Yeah, we've all been there. And the promises of advancement from her boss, Claudia, never materialize.
So she feels stuck.
Completely stuck, overlooked, and undervalued.
It's a classic case of unfulfilled potential.
It is, and it's made even more frustrating by the fact that she sees others around her, like the journalists she assists, getting the recognition that she craves.
So she's surrounded by people who are living the life she wants.
Exactly, and it just adds to her feelings of inadequacy.
I bet. And is there anything else about her work life that we should know?
Well, it's interesting to note the parallel between Francesca and her boss, Claudia.
Oh, okay. Tell me about that.
They both seem to find solace and inspiration in the Elena Ferrante books.
Ah, those books are amazing.
Right, they explore themes of female identity, ambition, and the complexities of relationships, things that both of these women are clearly struggling with.
I see. So the books represent this shared yearning for a more fulfilling life.
Exactly. They want a life where they can express themselves authentically and be recognized for their talent.
And it sounds like they're not getting that in their current lives.
No, not at all. And then, just as Francesca is hitting this low point, both personally and professionally, her old friend Eleonora re enters the picture.
Oh, Eleanor is back.
She is, after years of living abroad.
I wonder what that's about.
Well, her visit acts as a catalyst. It reminds Francesca of the dream she once held, the woman she used to be before the weight of responsibility and disappointment settled in.
So Eleanor is like a breath of fresh air.
She is, and this reawakening is further fueled by the rediscovery of her old notebooks filled with stories and poems from her youth.
Oh, wow. Her old writing. That's got to bring back some memories.
It does. It's like Eleanor's visit, coupled with the rediscovery of her writing, rekindles this creative spark in Francesca, this belief that maybe, just maybe, she has something valuable to offer the world.
That's nice. A little glimmer of hope.
It is, but just as Francesca starts to entertain this possibility of a new beginning, the story throws us a curveball.
Oh, no. What happens?
The story just hurtles towards this chaotic climax, a series of events that just push Francesca to her absolute breaking point.
Like what?
Well, there's a botched party, a tense confrontation with a character named Farik, an accidental attack. It's like her carefully constructed world is imploding.
Wow. It sounds intense.
It is, and Verdirame uses all these vivid sensory details to heighten the drama.
What kind of details?
Well, things like the broken crystal ball, the blood on Francesca's hands, her panicked escape.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah, it really underscores Francesca's psychological unraveling.
Right. And she's already on edge.
Exactly. And then just when you think it can't get any worse, we have the phone call with Eleonora.
Another phone call. This can't be good.
It's not. This one reveals Eleonora's big lie about Elena Ferrante.
Wait, what lie?
Well, it turns out that Eleonora has been pretending to be Elena Ferrante all along.
Whoa, hold on. I thought Elena Ferrante was a real person.
That's what everyone thought, but it turns out she's a fictional creation of Eleonora's.
Oh, my gosh, that's huge.
It is. This revelation completely shatters Francesca's perception of her friend, her world, and maybe even her own sanity.
I can't believe it.
Right. It makes you question everything you thought you knew.
It really does. And what happens next?
Well, the story leaves us hanging. We end with Francesca, barefoot and sweating, in front of her computer, typing, Io sono Elena Ferrante. Talk about a cliffhanger.
Wow, I did not see that coming.
It's a powerful and ambiguous ending, that's for sure.
It definitely leaves us with more questions than answers.
It does, but one thing is clear. Francesca is at a crossroads.
Right, this final act, this declaration, suggests a profound shift within her.
It's almost as if she's claiming this fictional identity as her own, you know? A way to reclaim some sense of agency in a life that feels totally out of control.
Precisely. But the question is this the beginning of a mental breakdown? A complete break from reality? Or is it a radical act of self-discovery? You know, a way of finally embracing her own voice and challenging the constraints that have been holding her back?
Those are great questions, and we'll delve into those questions and more in just a moment. Wow, it really feels like we've been handed all these puzzle pieces, you know? Francesca's childhood, her relationships, her career struggles, and now this shocking revelation about Eleonora.
Right.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. It is.
And it's so tempting to try to fit all those pieces together into this neat picture of who Francesca is.
I know, right?
But I think that's the beauty of Verdirame's writing, you know?
Yeah.
She doesn't give us easy answers.
Right.
We're only glimpsing this fraction of Francesca's inner world.
That's so true.
And it just makes it so compelling to read, you know?
Definitely.
Keep going back to that final scene.
Oh, yeah.
Francesca at her computer typing, Io sono Elena Ferrante. What do you think that means? For our listener out there, what do you think this act of assuming a fictional identity says about her state of mind at this point?
Well, one interpretation is that it's a sign of a complete break from reality, you know?
Okay.
She's internalized this lie, this fabricated identity, as a way to cope with all the chaos in her life. It's almost as if she's saying, if I can't control my own life, maybe I can control this fictional one.
Yeah. Right.
It makes me think about how we all create narratives for ourselves. You know, stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the world.
Yeah.
And sometimes those stories become so powerful that they start to blur the lines between reality and fiction.
It's true.
And for Francesca, that blurring of lines might be a defense mechanism.
Okay.
By taking on this persona of Elena Ferrante, she's able to escape the confines of her own life with all its pressures and disappointments.
Escape from reality.
Yeah, exactly. But there's another way to read that final scene, too, isn't there?
Oh, how so?
Well, it could be seen as a moment of empowerment.
Okay.
A reclaiming of her own voice and identity
Mhm.
after years of being silenced and overlooked.
So not a breakdown, but a breakthrough.
Yeah, exactly. Remember, Francesca spent most of her life putting the needs of others before her own.
Right. Her parents, Stefano, her children.
Yeah, and by claiming this fictional identity, she's finally giving herself permission to prioritize her own desires and ambitions.
So it's almost like she's saying, I'm done living in the shadows. I'm going to create my own narrative, even if it means breaking the rules.
Exactly. And it's significant that she makes this declaration while her family is calling for her,
Right.
needing her attention.
Mm.
It really suggests this turning point, a rejection of her self-sacrificing tendencies.
That's a good point. But how much of Francesca's struggle do you think is a product of her environment? And how much is internal,
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's clear she's been dealt a difficult hand.
Oh.
Societal pressures as a wife and mother, a stifling work environment, and this constant undercurrent of anxiety and self-doubt.
Right. And let's not forget the betrayal by Eleonora,
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
which really throws into question her entire support system.
Yeah, it's like the rug has been pulled out from under her.
It really is.
But it's also important to acknowledge that Francesca has agency.
Okay.
She makes choices, even if those choices are often driven by fear or insecurity.
So it's this complex interplay of nature and nurture,
Exactly.
external forces and internal struggles.
And that's what makes her such a fascinating character.
Oh, right.
She's not easily categorized or explained away.
And I think that's one of the reasons why this story resonates so deeply with readers.
It does.
Like Francesca's struggles, her anxieties, her yearning for something more. These are all universal experiences.
Definitely.
Things that many of us can relate to, even if we haven't faced the exact same circumstances.
Right.
It's like she's holding up a mirror to our own lives.
Yeah.
Forcing us to confront our own fears and insecurities, our own unfulfilled dreams.
It's true. And I think that's the mark of a truly great story. It stays with you long after you've finished reading it.
Yes.
It prompts you to ask yourself, what would I do in that situation?
Right.
How would I navigate those challenges?
So to bring it back to our listener, have you ever felt like Francesca? Have you ever felt stuck, unseen, like you're living someone else's life? Have you ever yearned for something more, but been afraid to reach for it?
If so, what steps have you taken or are you considering taking to break free from those constraints and create a life that feels more authentic and fulfilling?
Those are some tough questions, but they're worth pondering.
They are.
Because ultimately, I think that's what Verdirame is inviting us to do, to look inward, to examine our own lives and choices,
Yeah,
and maybe even challenge the narratives we've created for ourselves.
that's a powerful message. And I think it resonates especially strongly in our current cultural climate, where we're constantly bombarded with messages about who we should be and how we should live.
Right. It's so easy to get caught up in those external pressures.
It is.
And lose sight of our own internal compass.
So true. But stories like this one remind us that we always have a choice.
Okay.
We can choose to conform, to play it safe, to stay within the lines,
Mm-hmm.
or we can choose to break free, to embrace our true selves, even if it means facing uncertainty and discomfort.
And sometimes those two choices aren't mutually exclusive, are they?
That's such an important point. It's not always about making a radical break from everything we know.
Right.
Sometimes it's about making small, incremental changes.
Yeah.
About shifting our perspective, about reclaiming our own narratives.
And those small changes can have a ripple effect, right? Leading to bigger shifts over time.
Absolutely. So what does this all mean for Francesca?
I don't know. That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is her final act a sign of surrender or a declaration of independence? Is she stepping into madness or stepping into her power?
Well, I don't think there's a simple answer, but I do think that Verdirame leaves us with a sense of hope.
Okay.
This possibility that Francesca might finally be finding her voice, even if it's through this unconventional and perhaps unsettling path.
Right. It's like she's finally choosing to write her own story on her own terms.
Exactly. And that in itself is a powerful act of defiance.
It really is. And it leaves us wondering what happens next. What will she do with this newfound sense of agency? Will she embrace the chaos or try to regain control?
Well, Verdirame doesn't tell us, but that's the beauty of it, isn't it?
I guess so.
She leaves us to imagine the possibilities to create our own endings for Francesca, and perhaps in doing so, to envision new possibilities for ourselves.
So it's a story that stays with you.
It
So it
is.
prompts you to keep thinking, keep questioning, keep exploring.
And that's the power of great fiction, to open up new worlds, new ways of seeing ourselves and the world around us.
It's amazing how much we can learn from diving into just a few excerpts of a story.
It is, isn't it?
Like Francesca's journey is definitely one that'll stick with me.
Yeah, me too. It's a story that's just packed with psychological insight and emotional depth, you know.
Hmm.
It reminds us that even fictional characters can hold up a mirror to our own lives and our own anxieties.
Right, like all those things that we try to push down and ignore.
Exactly. And our own yearnings for something more, you know.
Oh yeah, that desire for something more.
We all have that, don't we?
I think so.
In one way or another.
Yeah, so as we wrap up our deep dive today,
Okay.
I want to leave our listener with this question.
All right, I like questions.
What resonated most with you about Francesca's story?
Good one.
Was it her struggle for validation, her anxieties as a mother, her unfulfilled creative ambitions, or was it maybe her ultimate act of defiance in claiming this new identity?
So many possibilities.
There are, and whatever it was that resonated with you, I hope this deep dive has encouraged you to think more deeply about the things that shape our lives.
Definitely.
The choices we make, the stories we tell ourselves.
And maybe, just maybe, it sparked a desire to create a new chapter in your own story.
Ooh, I like that.
One that feels more authentic, more fulfilling, and more aligned with your true self.
Beautifully said. And remember, every deep dive is unique and designed specifically for you, the listener.
That's right, so keep those fascinating sources coming.
Yes, we love reading them.
And we'll keep exploring together.
Until next time, keep those wheels turning
Yes. Keep thinking.
and embrace the power of your own story.